Off a day. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here today. The Committee on Health, Tourism, Historic Preservation, Land, and Justice is now called to order. Today's Thursday, October 17, 2019, and the time is about 1:03 p.m. Notices for this confirmation hearing were disseminated via email to all senators and all main media broadcasting outlets on Thursday, October 10, and again on Tuesday, October 15, 2019. The notice was also published in the Guam Daily Post on Thursday, October 10, and Tuesday, October 15, 2019. So we have several agenda items, all confirmations. The first is the appointment of Vincent A. Leon Guerrero as a member to the Guam Historic Preservation Review Board. Second is the appointment of Angela M. Camacho as a member to the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission. Third is the appointment of Joseph I. Cruz as a member to the Chamorro Land Trust Commission. Fourth is the appointment of Jose Arthur Chan as a member to the Guam Land Use Commission. So we'll begin first with the appointment of Vincent A. Leon Guerrero. And so I will ask those who've signed up to testify first, and then Vince, you will testify. So before we hear from the panel and the nominee, I would like to read what the current statutes regarding the establishments and the duties of the Guam Historic Preservation Review Board have to say. So the Historic Preservation Review Board consists of 5 members and 5 alternates. These are all appointed by the governor with the consent of the legislature. At least 1 member shall be knowledgeable in historic preservation, and a majority shall be recognized professionals in the disciplines of history, prehistoric and historic archaeology or architecture. At least 1 member must be knowledgeable of traditional Chamorro society and culture. It's the duty of the board to enter historic properties into the Guam Register of Historic Places, to evaluate applications for nominating properties to the National Register of Register of Historic Places, to review the Guam Survey of Guam Historic Properties, to review the content of the Comprehensive Preservation Plan, to serve as Board of Directors of the Guam Preservation Trust Fund, to serve as the State Historic Review Board for purposes related to the National Historic Preservation Act. Additionally, in relation to the historic district zones, the Review Board shall jointly establish zoning controls for all registered historic properties, including but not limited to the Hagåtña Historic District and the Inarajan Architectural Historic District. All right, we'll now accept testimony from Mr. Joe Kanata.
Hafiday, Senator. On behalf of the Guam Preservation Trust Board of Directors and staff, I write to express our strong support for Mr. Vincent A. Leon Guerrero to serve as history alternate on the Board of Directors, Guam Historic Preservation Review Board. Vince may not have known then, but 28 years ago, he began his journey to become an advocate of historic preservation. It was then that he started gaining the institutional knowledge from his work as Chief of Staff of the late Senator Elizabeth P. Areola. During this time, he assisted the senator and her colleagues of the 21st Guam legislature to develop the enabling legislation that created Guam Preservation Trust. Additionally, with his experience with territorial and federal relations gained from his employment afterwards, he also has imparted his knowledge and valuable lessons in Guam's history as a teacher in our public school system, and inspiring students to participate in the Guam and National History Day competitions, where students conduct original research of events in Guam's history. By doing so, Vince remains steadfast in advocating the importance of having a sound foundation of our shared history, and more importantly, to tell that story to the greater public. His students have competed locally over the years and have advanced to represent Guam, telling Guam's story at the National History Day competitions in Washington, D.C. His passion for history earned him a nomination as Teacher of the Year under the National History Day program. Indeed, with our island community expecting an increase in development, it is necessary that the GHPRB, the Guam Historic Preservation Review Board, maintain the capacity of harmonizing Guam's history together with preservation laws and regulations, and I am confident that Vince will work well with the Guam Historic Resources Division and our office to ensure that historic and cultural resources remain protected and that advocacy for the greater understanding of Guam's history in our community remain a priority. As you are well aware, the GHPRB members in turn become the board of directors for the Guam Preservation Trust, and a complete board allows for better management of our work to advance historic preservation in our community. It is in this regard that I once again extend GPT's strongest support for Mr. Leon Guerrero to the GHPRB and respectfully request that you and your colleagues confirm him and begin the great work that is needed to accomplish the mandates of both GHPRB and Guam Preservation Trust. Sizus Masi.
Sizus Masi, Mr. Kanata. Mr. John Uggan. Oh, may I recognize the presence of Senator Terlaje? Sizus Masi.
Hafide, Madam Chairperson, and members of the Committee of Health, Tourism, Historic Preservation, and Land and Justice. My name is John Uggan, and I'm submitting this testimony to support the executive appointment of Vincent A. Leon Guerrero as the alternative history member of the Guam Historic Preservation Review Board. I have known Vince Leon Guerrero for many years, and I believe he is an ideal candidate for this position. Anyone who knows Vince has experienced that he not only has a wealth of academic knowledge of Guam history, but embodies the understanding and passion in everything he says and does. He enjoys talking about many aspects of how our history has contributed and shaped our culture of our island to what it is today. He will incorporate lessons learned from history and relate it to everything from education to politics to essentially anything that has to do with Guam. He speaks from personal experience as well, having grown up in a time which our island has struggled and evolved from not even being able to speak Chamorro in our school to our present time in which we are fighting to preserve what we can in our language and our traditions. He takes all this knowledge and experience and is influencing the next generation. Over the past 12 years, Vince has taken on a role of educator of our island's youth, teaching Guam history at Ontalan Middle School. His passion for history has led his students to the National Day History Competition in Washington, D.C., where our young people have had the opportunity to share the lessons of our history in a national competition. Vince is a natural choice for this board position, and along with other members who share this passion and determination to preserve our history, I strongly believe that they will engage in meaningful projects to continue to bring the past to life for our future generations. Thank you for this opportunity and allowing me to express my support for Vince Leon Guerrero's appointment to the GHPRB.
Thank you very much, Mr. Uggan. Is there anyone else who'd like to testify on behalf of Mr. Leon Guerrero?
I would like to yield to my wife since she's here, and she's a very close friend with Vince.
Mrs. Cruz?
All right. Good afternoon, Senator Taitagui and Senator Terlaje, and thank you for this opportunity for us to present our ideas and also our feelings in regards to the people who are being, well, most especially at this moment for Vince Leon Guerrero. Vince and I were classmates since first grade through 8th grade. And of course, back then, I mean, we were angels because we were at the Catholic school. However, you know, when we got to middle school, of course, you know, he started showing his ways, but really he's a responsible person. But he's a responsible person, and of course he's grown out of that. And I do believe that he will do his best to serve his duty. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? If not, then Mr. Leon Guerrero, please.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, Senator Taitagui, members of the Committee on Health, Historic Tourism, Historic Preservation, Land and Justice. My name is Vincent A. Leon Guerrero, a lifelong resident of Manila and son of Guam. I appear before you today to provide testimony on my appointment as a history alternate representative to the Guam Historic Preservation Review Board. I am currently employed as a teacher in the Guam Department of Education at Louis P. Antala Middle School, where I have taught Guam history for going on 12 years. As a matter of fact, I am have been the only middle school level teacher of Guam history. I usually tell my students as I welcome them to my class that I am history. One often hears the adage attributed to the poet, singer, and civil rights activist Maya Angelou. Quote, "I have great respect for the past. If you don't know where you've come from, you don't know where you're going." Like her, I too have great respect for our past. I'm sure some of you here are old enough to appreciate just how difficult it has been for us who grew up at a time where our cultural practices were frowned upon. At the risk of sounding bitter, which I am not, I grew up in a time where we would see printed metal signs which read English only, and went to school where corporal punishment and monetary fines were meted out for speaking our native tongue. Some of us were shamed into abandoning our heritage. We worked hard to demonstrate our desire to assimilate and succeed in our pursuit of the American dream. During the tumultuous 1960s and the changing geopolitical landscape in Asia, Guam found itself at the forefront of the U.S.'s effort to increase the presence and influence around the Pacific Rim. Local leaders grew increasingly concerned that decisions that affect our island were made without including local leaders in the process. Guam's push for a seat at the table resulted in several self-determination efforts, which continue today. I credit individuals like Senators Ricky Berdalio, Richard Taitano, Carl Gutierrez, educators like Robert Underwood, then Principal and former Speaker Ted Nelson, Narissa Britannia Schaefer, Hope Cristobal, author Chris Perez Howard, and just plain Joes like entrepreneurs Ron Rivera and Ron Tien, to name a few, fanned my desire to learn more about the historical injustices of the past. These were the ones who dared to speak up and challenge the status quo. I bring this up today to provide a snapshot of the events that have led many, like myself, to find ways to serve our island in positive ways. If you will, I wish to tell you a little bit about myself. Following my graduation from the University of Nebraska, I returned home expecting to do what was expected of us by our elders: find employment, raise a family, build a successful career, and retire. I have worked with troubled youth and with our elder population. I soon was encouraged to take a position with the Bureau of Budget and Management Research as a budget analyst, working my way to supervisor. It was from there that I was offered to serve as Special Assistant for Federal Programs in the Berdalio-Regis administration. The following year, I was tapped as the Director of BBMR. Following the governor's defeat, I, along with several key advisors, invested in Images Advertising. It was during this period that I served as a consultant to the late Senator Elizabeth P. Areola and as Secretary for the Association of Pacific Island Legislatures, and for a short time, her Chief of Staff. It was during this time that the Center introduced and marshaled the passage of PL 2151, which established the Guam Preservation Trust. My career paths have been characterized metaphorically by those closest to me as a rolling rock, and rolling rocks gather no moss. In 1993, I was asked by the newly elected delegate to Congress, Robert Underwood, to serve as district director for his office. In this capacity, I assisted in the development and passage of key legislation known as 103-339, known as the Guam Excess Land Act, passed in 1994. following Mr. Underwood's unsuccessful run for the office of governor, I found myself in obvious need of a job change and concluded that I still had the burning desire to be of service to the island relevantly. While perusing the newspaper, I read a short press release inviting graduates with post-secondary degrees to consider earning a teaching certificate and soon enrolled in UOG's first teacher bootstrap program, where I met Mr. Uggan. My successful completion of the additional coursework and passing the praxis exam, a call from then UMS Principal Naomi Taitungfong offered a teaching position to pilot its Guam history class. My 5-year plan has now become 12. Why is historic preservation so important to a community? The history of a community contributes to its personality. In my travels to various locales, I was attracted to sites which told the community's story. Preserving the history of a place through its significant historical resources gives a community its unique character, engenders pride in its history. Historic preservation links residents to our roots and honors those of the past. Historic preservation adds to the quality of our lives and enhances the community economically. I believe that it involves more than saving and restoring old buildings and sites of our past. There are economic, cultural, environmental, and educational benefits, all of which are intrinsically connected to one another and to the living memory of involved communities. Madam Chairwoman, and members of the committee, I feel I possess the skills, the institutional expertise, and most importantly, the passion and desire to serve on the board, and I hope you will agree. I am now open to address questions. Sidus Masi.
Thank you very much. Senator Taitugui, did you have any questions?
Hafaday Vince, and hafaday everyone for being here today to testify in something you believe in. It's not always possible to have people come and testify in front of you. So Vince, you owe them dinner, for coming out. I'm already making you spend money right now because I know that in the position that you hold, that you will be holding, because you already have my support. You're well versed, you're well educated, and most especially with the history and your passion. Yeah, you have a lot of passion, definitely. And that being said, I know that sometimes you guys have these fundraisers that you put on to kind of help, or you find money, in other words. What are some of the ideas that you have to assist the Guam Preservation Trust in generating revenue for them in order to move their vision forward?
It takes a village to raise. That adage actually goes to every person in the community, including the business community, institutions in Washington, to engage, to become part of it, provided that the programs that are being put forth for fundraising or advancing a grant, for example, has standing. It should meet the need of the community, and the historical aspect of it must link. You can't do it alone. We can't do it alone. We can't depend on the government necessarily, or federal government for it. There has to be an engagement, as the building next door clearly shows. We are able to do this. Without a valid or viable labor pool, investments will be reduced, and we are already experiencing that reduction. And subsequently, the building permit fees, in which feeds the organization, are at risk. So they're just like historic preservation, it's intrinsically linked with everything else. there are other forces beyond, but have a very clear and present activity that must be resolved.
Thank you for that, and thank you for recognizing that sometimes the line of work that you're in right now does reach out to another entity to support, being there when it comes time for Department of Labor to advocate for the H2 workers. So your job doesn't just stay in concentrating on that, it branches out to other areas. So I appreciate you recognizing that. In fact, that's the first time, Vince, I've heard someone realizing that their position isn't just stuck in one department, that they have to reach out to other departments for assistance, and I greatly appreciate that, and that's why I support you, because, well, you think, good minds think alike, right? No, I'm not saying mine, but
Thank you
maybe
very
Joe
much.
and you, because Joe's a wealth of knowledge. He's a wealth of knowledge, so I think the two of you guys are going to get along just fine. Okay,
very much.
and thank you so much for stepping up to the plate. And thank you, Joe, for being here.
All right, we have one more person signed up. Mr. Marquillo, if you would join us, yes, to testify on behalf of Vince Leon Guerrero. You may proceed.
Hafaday, Senator Terlaje and Senator Tello, how are you? Thank you for taking time to entertain the nominations. We are very excited. Thank you. We're very excited. As you know, we've been kind of in this rebuilding process for a couple of years of just trying to get the capacity back onto the review board and onto the board of the Guam Preservation Trust. And I think that having Vince on board will be a great step in the right direction. He's very, I think his work and his relationship with the community is one that's very representative. I think he carries the ethos of the local folks in terms of what their priorities are. And I think one of the key features that he brings to both of the boards will be his ability to communicate with the local folks and to help gather and implement what their priorities are for the kind of work that we undertake. So I think the search for the board members has taken some effort, but I think we've come across with some good candidates for your consideration, and I know we're already itching to get back to work, so we're hoping for the support of the legislature for the nominations. Thank you.
Thank you. May I ask, who is the current history member?
That's Polly Eric Forbes.
All right. And how does the alternate work?
You know, because our board is very collaborative, we typically will have all the primaries and the alternates present. The purpose of the alternates is, of course, in the event that the primary is unable to attend, sickness or off-island travel, then that still allows us to complete our quorum and votes. So in terms of sharing information, everybody that is on the board, primary or alternate, receives all the information. All the members are invited to participate in all the committees, all the public meetings, all the activities of both boards. We sometimes will make a distinction about the voting on the motions, where it's important to identify that the primary will vote for that seat. But very often, because of the work of the committees, we're able to actually come to consensus prior to going into the board meetings, because we've worked out all the kinks and working sessions and whatever the collaboration and the discussions need to be, so that when we get to the board level, we're able to act pretty quickly.
I'd like to thank all of you for your testimony. It's good to hear the different aspects. And Vince, thank you for accepting the nomination. I think you will be a good addition to the board also. If you don't mind, I'd like to ask you a couple questions. For example, do you have any conflicts in business or personal projects that might conflict with your role on this Preservation Review Board?
Absolutely none. I'm just a humble teacher.
All right. Do you apply for grants from the Preservation Trust?
No, ma'am. I'm too busy teaching to apply for anything else.
I wanted to remark that you said you are the only Guam history teacher in middle school. Why is that? That's the only place that they put a program like that in?
Guam history, the middle school is an elective. It just recently, there's a law that says that in order for a person or an individual to graduate from high school, they would have had to have taken at least 1 year of Guam history at the secondary level. A recent, the middle school is considered secondary. Recently, it was amended to now completely state without reservation that it includes middle school. So the language middle school applies there. Now, the GVB, the Guam Education Policy Board allowed Untalan Middle School to pilot the program, in which that's how I came into the position. Schools can do that. They can stand up Guam history classes. Not sure what the motivation or disincentives for doing that is, the other middle schools. However, we stood it up for 12 years, participated in the National History Day contest for 12 years, and for 12 years we have sent representatives from Guam to the national. So our school is undefeated and great risk. So it's a matter of commitment from a principal. Our principals, and there have been a few since Naomi, Ms. Tidingfong, they have all supported it because everyone likes winners. And so I saw it upon myself that in order for me to save it and to keep it going and bring life to it, we worked at winning. So I came away with a start of 4 students to now this year, I'm proud to say, we have now 5 coaches, and perhaps maybe 52 students who will be competing. At the local level, unfortunately, we can only send the winners in each category to represent Guam.
In your role as a Preservation Review Board member, what do you see adding to this board right now? Are you familiar with their work?
To a large degree, yes. Not necessarily on the architectural engineering side, but it's from that also that I find some of disconnect, and I think we need to bridge the gap between what we do, or I'm going to be doing, on this, and the construction companies or the developers, because it's largely seen, the work of this organization here is largely seen more like obstacles. And I look at that simply, and I say that as an uneducated comment, because to have these historical elements included, there's always the argument, oh, it's going to cost us this much. Or on the side of archaeological studies that are required, as a result of finding on site, work has to stop. Stoppages mean money, and it's drainage on the company that's doing this. But my contention is that all of this should be built in. And at some point, I think in communication is going to open that and solve the problem. Of course, totally within the law. Now, if your scope is is an attempt to circumvent the law, no, because things have been circumvented for too many years, and I'm not talking about the legal aspect would take you to court. No, I'm talking about the conscience that's involved in deciding to forego our cultural identity that is primacy for me. For many years, we've been shamed somehow to diminish who we are. And I think it's time that we champion who we are. Like I say to all those who take my class, we are cousins. We are not separated by political lines. But if you look at the consanguinity and the DNA, no one can argue against it. Now, in terms of not understanding the culture, we know where that came from. Okay, so, there you go.
Yeah, you're correct that there is the community, I guess there's some kind of, we're trying to harmonize history and preserving our culture and our history, yet there's sometimes a discord, right? They see it as anti-development, but I hope that you will be able to achieve that you were there when they wrote this law. You have the vision, you saw the vision that they intended for Guam, and I know we've seen it in other places around the world, that is really why they are unique, why they are strong, because they are able to preserve their culture, their identity, and sometimes it's preserving physical features that remind us every day, or that we can be proud of, that we accomplished that feat, or in our history, we did that. And so I'm very glad. I'm looking forward to your contribution, and I'm hoping you will be yourself as you've always been. You have a lot of years of experience in politics and many things, and working for different administrations, government, non-government, and that to bring all those aspects of our community together and to stand your ground and say, we're going to take care of these things. I'm looking forward to that. So thank you. So thank you again.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Senator Taidubi, appreciate it.
All right. So we'll conclude the part of this hearing for Vincent Leon Guerrero. Si Diyos maasitado. Thank you.
Buen provecho.
Thank you very much. We're going to begin with the appointment of Angela M. Camacho as a member of the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission. The Guam Ancestral Lands Commission is a very unique commission on Guam, authorized to and directed to establish and maintain 5 separate registries for the purposes of recording accurate information in the settlement of ancestral claims: an original landowners registry, an excess lands registry, a claims registry, a conditional awards registry, and an ancestral title registry, which is a listing of applicants granted land title in return for the surrender of all their ancestral property claims. As we know, ancestral property was taken from Guam landowners and by the U.S. government, and it was the government of Guam that decided to create a commission, and that when land was returned to the government of Guam, they would in turn return that to the original landowners. And so it is the duty of this commission to determine those original landowners, to ensure that fairness and justice occurs, and owners who looks like are unlikely to get their land back, yet the government of Guam is trying to also compensate them for the loss of that land. And so that is where it gets very complex for the commission to solve those problems, and well, not problems, but to solve and to really benefit these landowners. And we've seen now decades of the effects of land takings on families, on generations, and so your work is not only very important, but very urgent. That being said, I would, if you would like to provide testimony, please do.
Buenas and half a day, Senator Therese Terlaje, Chairperson for the Committee on Health, Tourism, Historic Preservation, Land and Justice, and Senator Terlaje, committee member. My name is Angela Maria Camacho, and I'm here today to provide testimony in support of my nomination as a member of the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission. I am currently the housing manager for Guam Housing Corporation. I am also a realtor with Today's Realty, a profession I've enjoyed since 2003. Over the past 16 years, I've worked hard to develop a strong network of relationships with both private sector and government agencies, which I've utilized to provide customers and clients with the most valuable and current real estate information to meet their needs. Prior to real estate, I was an office manager and administrative officer with a local engineering and environmental firm, respectively. I also worked for 3 years in the insurance industry. I'm a graduate of the Academy of Lady of Guam and received my bachelor's degree in business management from the University of Guam. Since working at the Guam Housing Corporation, there's been a steady increase in rental income and collections with continued efforts on rehabilitating and leasing vacant units to low to moderate income families and increasing collections within the rental division and loans. I was instrumental in updating the Guam Housing Corporation rental division lease agreements to reflect Public Law 34-146, the Guam Landlord and Tenant Rental Act of 2018, which is already, we've already updated our leases and it's in effect. Challenges at Guam Housing Corporation are the large number of vacant units due to homes needing repairs and evictions of non-paying tenants and non-compliant tenants. With the hard work and effort from the team at Guam Housing Corporation, I'm confident that we can continue to overcome these challenges. I am a dispossessed ancestral landowner descendant. I am the daughter of the late Jose L.G. Camacho and Agnes Menibusin Camacho, and the granddaughter of late Enrique Martinez Camacho, married to the late Emeteria Baza Leoncaro Camacho, who is a dispossessed ancestral landowner under 21 GCA Chapter 80, Lot 5172 Timoning. I've read Chapter 80 of 21 GCA, the real property relative to the establishment and duties of the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission. I'm willing and able to contribute my time, knowledge, and expertise to the Commission, although I'm quite new to public service and government. Sizuos Maasi for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much, Ms. Camacho. I'm glad you read the statute that, or you talked about your ancestral lands history, because that is one of the criteria for this board, and so that is satisfied, Sizuos Maasi. I'm going to allow now the Director of the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission to testify, Mr. Joseph Ngoko.
Yes, good afternoon, Senator Terlaje and Senator Taitikui. My name is Joseph Ngoko. I'm the Executive Director for the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission. I've been in this position since January 23rd of this year, confirmed by the GALC board. Several months ago, Ms. Camacho indicated her interest in serving as a board member. I advised her that one of the prerequisites to become a board member was you had to be either a dispossessed landowner, heir, or descendant. I instructed her as to the steps to take to find out, and she did contact the staff at the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission, and from there it was confirmed that she was indeed a dispossessed landowner's descendant. My testimony will be short. I've known Ms. Camacho approximately for a year. In my observation of her, she has an uncanny way of dealing with any given subject situations. Her meticulousness is commendable. I have witnessed her in several of the meetings with the administration, wherein she has sat in to speak on behalf of her boss, namely Alice Tyron, the director for the Guam Housing Corporation. She presents several options and alternatives, giving it a very clear and approachable and logical way to address certain matters. I believe and I guess that is why I am here to testify in her behalf. As the Executive Director of the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission, there are many beneficiaries that would be critical of the decisions that we make, since they are concerned about, particularly compensation, many issues, the lack of access, easements into their ancestral lots. I need a person like Ms. Camacho simply to present different alternatives, as there are many different options that the public provides during my, the GALC board meetings that's held twice a month, the second Wednesday and the fourth Wednesday of every month. And so given that, that is why I'm here in support of her confirmation. She brings a fresh approach and is very knowledgeable of in both the business and government sector in dealing with situations that an average citizen does not. And that is my testimony, Senators. Thank you.
Mr. Ngoko. Senator Taitigui.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Madam Chair, for the record, I just wanted to indulge that I'm a very good friend of Angie Camacho. We've known each other for over 16 years or 15 years. And Angie, if I was not sitting here, I'd be sitting down there right now testifying in your favor and your character, your honesty, and all the things that I've known you to be. I've actually, Madam Chair, I've actually sought advice from Ms. Camacho on several occasions on, certain things, subject matters that would be helpful in actually making decisions that are morally and ethically correct. That's why I know, especially in this position that you're taking, which needs those attributes, to be honest, ethically, morally correct when it comes to people's properties. And I know that you carry that trait as someone who's known you for over 15, 16 years. My only sad thing is that, oh my gosh, now you're probably going to get rid of one of these things, which is the real estate property. You're not going to have time. Just taking your position at the Guam Housing has limited your, extra work that you have placed on your time, which is almost nil now because of all the good work that you've done at Guam Housing. I commend you for that. I knew they chose the right person. So congratulations on the new program that you have going and put in place, and it's long needed. There is something, Angie, I'm hoping that you stay on top of it with the good director here. Thank you, Joe. Good to see you, Joe. And that is the part where Gita is actually your administrator for properties. They oversee some of the lands that you have, and they help generate funding and revenue for you for ancestral lands. And one of the biggest findings is when we were working with the fiber optic cables, they looked into, and I knew about this, but I'm glad that they finally, decided to take it by the rein and move forward. And that is the $4.5 million that was discovered that AT&T owes the Guam ancestral lands. Now there's going to be a lot of movement moving forward. We're hoping that a bill that passes in the next session on the fiber optic cables task force will be put in place. And there's going to be a lot of help and information needed by ancestral lands to be able to recover or assess fees. And this is another opportunity that I hope, Angie, that you take this by the horns and go with it, because I know that ancestral lands needs funding. And it's very interesting. Please come to my office anytime. You know, you have my number. I think you know it by heart. Call me up if you want more information on it to help you. But I think Gita, they were in a conference call with me with FCC yesterday. And they're a little bit more versed on what the federal side is on fiber optic cables. Now we need the local side to assess. Okay, so that's what's happening now. Angie, Ayade, ready, get set, go, because I know you're going to do a lot of things at Ancestral Lands, and don't extend yourself, because I know you tend to want to help everybody. So good luck to you. You know you have my support, and I kindly ask Madam Chair, for the support for Angie Camacho.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Ms. Camacho,
Yes.
if we could get a copy of your testimony sometime, that would help us in putting together the committee report.
Okay.
But also, if I could just ask you a couple of things from what you said.
Sure.
So first of all, you are the housing manager at the Guam
Housing Corporation.
Corporation. That is an unclassified position.
Correct.
How long have you had that position?
January of this year.
Oh, okay. So, do you see is there any potential conflict in holding that position and being on this commission?
I don't see any, but definitely if there were any, if it was a voting thing, I wouldn't vote on it. As a realtor, we follow a high standard of code of ethics, and honesty is definitely big in our business. So,
I was going to ask you the same thing about your role as a realtor, if you foresee any conflict with the role as an Ancestral Land Commission member.
as Senator Taidagui mentioned, I have very little time for real estate,
I see.
although I do have a few, not very many, but a few clients and customers that I've taken care of for a very long time and will be there if they need me. But other than that, I'm not taking new business, and I don't actively work as a realtor.
All right. Well, I know that the Ancestral Lands Commission is involved with, they're looking for investment of use of their property, so for income, as we discussed. But mostly, it's a fiduciary role for the benefit of the beneficiaries. That's your
Understood.
primary goal, right? As opposed to creating any kind of kingdom at the Ancestral Lands Commission, we need to benefit these beneficiaries whose families have been displaced in many, many occasions, and they've waited many years. So it's tough. It's going to be tough, but I'm hoping your realtor expertise and your housing management expertise is actually going to help this Ancestral Lands Commission in very specific ways, yes. Do you, what about business interests? Do you have any other outside business interests that might conflict?
No, Senator, I don't have time for anything other than what's in
Already.
front of us already, so.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for taking this position. What about your ancestral land? Is that resolved, pending, or what is the status? Is it one of...
If I may chime in, Senator Terlaje. First of all, I just wanted to just add in the Guam Economic Development Authority performs as a property management team for the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission. It is simply a memo of understanding that there's no legal binding weight should we decide to outsource and seek other means of investment consultants or investment management. Secondly, in regards to Ms. Camacho's requisite as a descendant of an ancestral landowner, of the board members are also realtors. They have also, but they have gone through the briefings and have been made aware of the law regarding possible conflicts of interest. In Public Law 2545, if I may just go back, that was passed, I believe, in June of 1999 by Republican-controlled legislature, working with then Democratic Governor Carl Gutierrez. They came together, I believe, to exact some form of justice for the ancestral landowners, dispossessed landowners, by coming together and bringing about coming together and with the intent of doing pursuing or starting the process of pursuing means to take care of these folks. The board members that are serving right now, a majority of the 7 board members, I believe at least 4 of them are realtors. But at no time have they ever displayed to me any, and mind you, they were all nominated by previous administrations, have displayed any form of conflicts. And I work very well with them simply because we agree to disagree. Yes, they do give me a hard time at every board meeting, and that's twice a month. And so I believe Ms. Camacho, in her meticulous way and her objectivity, will likewise do the same. I'm just hoping that we can work together to solve many problems.
I just want to, as the chairperson of the committee, put these things on the record so that it's clear going forward. And these are historical documents that they might look back on later, and I just want those to be clear on the record. So, Ms. Camacho, if you don't mind, if you could just tell us what you understand to be the status of your ancestral lands claims.
So we're talking about lot 5172, which is Oka Tamuning, and we reside there, so I'm pretty sure that that's already been resolved.
Okay.
I could easily provide that answer for you, senators. Many, as Mr. Joseph Borja, the Department of Land Management Director, that was just, I believe, confirmed here in August of this year, stated during his confirmation hearing process. Records with the Department of Land Management are there. However, approximately 40% of the records still have not been scanned, so to speak. And so intensive research will have to be conducted within the Department of Land Management, the Superior Court of Guam, the District Court of Guam, and any other resources.
Yes. Well, Mr. Ngoko, I'm not asking you to resolve her claim right now. I just want to know what is the status. If she has a pending claim, that's relevant, I think. If her land is one of those that's, for example, under the Tizen Airport, and if they're beneficiaries of compensation,
Yes.
I just think that's relevant. So she thinks that those
Not to
claims
my
are
knowledge.
resolved.
Yeah.
Understood.
All right.
I just wanted to clarify that a majority of them, several of the board members, as a prerequisite in the process of serving as commissioners, you need to be. I don't know. I believe I understand the intent of why the 25th Guam legislature inserted that requirement that you be a descendant.
Yes.
Just simply because I guess you would have the feel
Right.
for.
We've established she's qualified, so
Okay.
thank you. All right, so thank you, Mr. Ngoko, and
Thank you,
Mrs. Masi
Senator.
Tatlu, Ms. Camacho. And thank you for agreeing to serve on this commission. It might be very time-consuming. They have 2 meetings a month. Are you going to be able to make those?
I'll be there.
Yes, all right. So, Mrs. Masi, thank you very much.
Thank you, too.
Thank you, senators.
All right. That concludes the portion of this public hearing regarding the appointment of Ms. Angela Camacho to the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission. Thank you. We now proceed with the appointment of Joseph I. Cruz as a member of the Chamorro Land Trust Commission. So Mr. Cruz, Mr. Lizama, Mayor Lizama, and Mr. Santos. I'd ask Mr. Santos, or, yeah, if you would begin, and thank you. Or if you would give me 1 second. All right, so the Chamorro Land Trust Commission is responsible for the disposition of Chamorro homelands, public lands pursuant to mandates to advance the social, cultural, and economic development and well-being of the Chamorro people by way of residential, agricultural, and commercial land distribution and economic assistance programs. Their mission is to carry on activities necessary to assist and inform the community in obtaining maximum utilization of lands, including development of lands for their highest and best use in all phases. Residential and agricultural leasing and commercial leasing now. All right, Mr. Santos, please proceed.
My name is Paul L. Santos, and I am the Guam Chief Surveyor, Chief of Cadastre at the Department of Land Management. Excuse me. I'm here to support the confirmation of Mr. Joseph I. Cruz to be a member of the Chamorro Land Trust Commission. I worked with Joe for several years before he retired as a land planner at the department. He worked in and managed all the various divisions except for survey. He has an excellent grasp of land issues in general and of planning in particular. This knowledge and understanding of the intricacies of the work in each division will help him contribute to the overall mission of the CLTC. An issue of importance that Joe has expressed great interest in and is what we would love to see is the surveying and mapping of CLTC land that will meet all subdivision requirements. In his last term, he pointed out that piecemeal surveys are costly and create more problems for CLTC and its clients. We fully acknowledge this. DLM Survey and Planning have created subdivision master plans which guide CLTC and the surveyors and their clients in locating the land parcels to lease. This is an excellent start as it lays the foundation for an organized and planned subdivision. However, this is not enough as the surveys for these subdivisions are done by different surveyors for different clients and completed at different times, seemingly lacking an organized planning perspective, making it difficult to plan for the infrastructure requirements so essential to the CLTC community and often producing unnecessary property line adjustments, often after the survey has been performed. He has called for the survey and mapping of an area by one surveyor. This way, there's optimal control and management of the scope, timeliness, and deliverables to CLTC. It is only then can CLTC effectuate a good subdivision that meets subdivision and CLTC requirements. This is the planner's perspective and insights that he brings. This is exactly what CLTC needs to effectively fulfill its mission. He has my full support and trust that the legislature will confirm him to be a member of the Chamorro Land Trust Commission. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Santos. I think your testimony, being very experienced at Department of Land Management, and is very relevant today. So I want to thank you, especially for being here and for your testimony. Mayor Lizama.
Good afternoon, Senator Terlaje and Senator Tadigui. My name is Robert Sanchez Lozama. I'm here as a private citizen in support of Joe I. Cruz's confirmation, or in this case, I would say reconfirmation, as a member of the Chamorro Land Trust Commission. I remembered back a few years where I sat in front of the previous committee testifying in support of Joe I. Cruz's confirmation. And I am here again this afternoon at his invitation to come out and testify on his behalf, and I am here for that purpose. I served as mayor of Jigo for 16 years. Of my 16 years, Joe I. Cruz has always been a member of the Jigo Municipal Planning Council for over 10 years. I've known Joe perhaps maybe over or close to 15 years, and our relation was really more started as members of the Santa Benedita Catholic Church up in Cafagumas, Jigo. That is where I first met Joe, and in line with that, knowing of him and knowing of his attributes in the Department of Land Management, And at the same time, that is where I asked him to serve as a member to the Jigu Municipal Planning Council. And I was very happy, of course, that he accepted. Along those lines, because he has the background. He has the planning vision to map out our island in terms of areas of development up in Jigo's cases in many of our oversight or public areas that we have for land issues dealing with land management with zoning. Along those lines, I've also had the opportunity to sit in many of the Chamorro Land Trust Commission meetings while I was employed under the office of former Senator Tom Ada, and I've also seen Mr. Cruz's performance as a member. Given the challenges, of course, that the Chamorro Land Trust has, and him having the litany of experience in the land areas, I have every confidence and faith that Joe will continue. I can say this much, that if he had a choice to seek employment, which he had the opportunity in at least a couple of cases to accept employment, he had called me that he'd rather continue and concentrate as a member to the Chamorro Land Trust, knowing that his term expired back in April of this year. He has continuously talked about the desire to wanting to serve. He went off island for a few months or a few weeks, came back, and still wants to be part of the membership of the Chamorro Land Trust. And I think the composition presently with the Chamorro Land Trust is Joe, has the leadership and experience to continue leading and getting Chamorro Land Trust up to speed, and at the same time out of all these issues that are being faced with challenges. So in that, fellow members of the committee, and Senator Terlaje, the chairperson for lands, and Senator Taigui, and all members of the 35th, I ask for your consideration in support and confirming Joe I. Cruz, to reconfirm Joe I. Cruz as a member to the Chamorro Land Trust.
Thank you very much. I think I'd also like to take this time to read a testimony from Pika Farron, who has testified in support of the nomination, or she says, Hafaday, unfortunately, I will be holding a CLT Commission meeting at the same time, so will not be able to attend. And so there is a meeting going on right now. I want to express my full support of Mr. Joseph Cruz's nomination and appointment back on the Chamorro Land Trust Commission. Mr. Cruz has served as my vice chairman, and I have found him to be a very valuable member of the commission. He brings institutional knowledge from his years of service with the commission, along with knowledge and expertise he gained from years working with the Department of Land Management. He has in the past had some attendance issues. However, he has stated to me that he's committed and will be available for this new term. During his time with us, I could always count on Mr. Cruz for his attention to detail for our very complex issues, and his ability to speak plainly and clearly on how he believes the trust should progress. He has played a vital role on the commission, and I am eager to have him back with us. And I hope Senator Terlaje and other senators confirm him post-haste. That's from Pika Farron, the current chairwoman of the Chamorro Land Trust Commission. There's also testimony by former Senator Willie Flores, very shining remarks about you, Mr. Cruz, and he's asked us also to confirm you, and talks about your service in the community and your public service and your professional demeanor while at Department of Land Management, and your knowledge of keen understanding of the Chamorro culture without disrespect for other cultures which call Guam home. And many other things. Mr. Cruz, this will also be included as part of the confirmation record. And now we will hear from you.
Good afternoon, Chairman, Senator Therese Terlaje, and Senator Taitagui. My name is Joseph Ignacio Cruz. I am married to Teresita Mesa Cruz, together with 4 children and a proud grandparents of 6 grandchildren. I am very humble with the nomination to serve the Chamorro Land Trust for a 3rd term. I am retired from the government of Guam for 43 years of service. I worked for the Department of Land Management over 20 years. I began as a document analyst at Land Records Division in the mid-70s. I became a land agent supervisor for Rights-of-Way Division, Highway Engineering Division, Department of Public Works. I was the lead agent in the land acquisition on road projects such as the reconstruction of Route 8, Barrigada to Agana, Route 10, Barrigada to Chalampago, Route 14 to Muning, Route 2, Mariso and Maddock and Agate, San Victorious Road, Houghton to Lotte Hotel, and Route 1, Marine Drive, from Dededo Route 3 intersection to Route 6 in Agana. The above reconstruction project funded by DOT resulted in a rights-of-way certification. Then I returned to the Department of Land Management in the early 90s as a land use planner. I retired as a land use planner on September 2013. As a senior planner, some of my successful projects on the land use application for major land use development approved by the Land Use Commission includes Leo Palace in Jonia, Reef Hotel in Tumon, Machanano's Housing Subdivision in Dededo, the Paris Housing Subdivision in Jigo, the Horizontal Property Regime, which is the condo housing in Tamuning, to name a few. This experience has allowed me to interpret and implement Chapter 21, Guam Code annotated with a great consideration applicable to real estate law, such as zoning, subdivision, land registration, horizontal property regime, to include but not limited to Chapter 66, which is the building permit requirement. All these projects included environmental constraints that had to be considered. During the Camacho Molan administration, resignation of Chamorro Land Trust Administrative Director, I was detailed to the Chamorro Land Trust Agency to oversee the operation. With my institution knowledge and experience, I hope to be able to continue assisting in the enforcement of Chamorro Land Trust Act of Guam, pursuant to Chapter 75, as I have done in my prior 2 terms. Thank you for your time and opportunity to speak on my behalf.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cruz, and thank you again for agreeing to serve again on this commission, which we have seen is the board members, the commission members spend a lot of time. And for example, this meeting today that they're in might take 4 hours, and I think that's normal for them. And if I'm correct, they meet twice a month, not just once, and because they are trying to resolve long-standing issues from many, many years. And so like the director said the chairwoman said it's complex issues, which your expertise has been very valuable. And so I want to thank you also for all your years of service in the past during very, controversial times, if I may say. And I want to just ask you, do you still believe in the mission of the Chamorro Land Trust, of its original purpose of residential and agricultural leases?
Yes and no. Yes, I do believe that we should provide the residential and agricultural, but we should also go into commercial, where majority of the funding might be in that area of revenue.
What is the funding for? What do you need funding for?
We need to put infrastructure on most of our development for our residential lease, and also the assistant from Department of Agriculture to do a agricultural program, because a lot of lands that are being leased right now are not to its expectation, and we need money to provide those programs.
To provide the programs for existing lands,
Yes,
and to
tenants.
provide infrastructure.
Yes.
All right. I just want to make sure that that's a limited need for income. It's not to create a huge bureaucracy, but really just to get the residential and agricultural leases going. So the commercial leases are not the end goal. They are the means to the residential and agricultural subdivision and infrastructure. I mean, do you agree with that?
What I meant was that the revenue to support our funding from the commercial leases.
Yes.
Because if we're issuing a residential lease and wait for them to develop for us to get the revenue from taxation, then it's very minimal is coming in right now. So, and at the same time, a lot of our land registration needs to happen, and we need funding for registration, the unregistered government survey land.
Oh, the land registration
yes,
to survey?
yes.
All right. So the Attorney General is doing the land registration legal proceedings as soon as the lands are surveyed. That's the report I've been given. And so I guess they're just completing the rest of those that are currently surveyed, and then we need to further survey
Yes.
more of the land.
Yes.
All right. Do you, there've been issues about collections on commercial properties. Do you feel like you're able to do that or to help the board with that? You know, it's no inhibitions, I guess, is what the board needs, you know, when it comes to the collections on those commercial properties. Or how do you think you can help the commission to improve its collections on commercial properties?
Well, we did a memorandum of understanding with GIDA, and that will be part of our revenue input, where GIDA will handle the negotiation of leases, and there is no collection from a lease on residential or agricultural.
Right, just commercial.
Yes.
Do you think that can be improved?
Oh, yes. We can improve based on identifying a lot of our land that can be developed, like, for example, the old War Memorial Hospital. We can come up with a program that instruct GIDA to do a PUD development or a...
But can collections on existing commercial leases be improved?
Yes, it could, but at the same time, based on what the leases that was executed, how long will it...
Right, we can't increase the amount until the term
lease
ends, but
yes.
the reason I'm asking is because in the news recently they've talked about, you know, collections on certain leases not being up to date, and so I just want to make sure that all the commission members are not intimidated by that part of the commission work.
Well, during my time, a lot of the leases that comes through is from the prior commissions, and our hands were tied to improve any of the collection. Classic example is the use of the lot up at the recycling. It's been used as a in-kind, and we're losing. Companies are making money left to right.
All right, well, I hope that you and the commission members are going to not stop being creative in finding ways to...
I have a couple of cases that I brought up to the commission, recommended the current director to give a violation and a termination, but it never happened. And that's during my time. So that's just one case that I feel that...
There have been, in the last maybe 10 years, transfers of Chamorro Land Trust land to other government agencies or entities for other purposes. Of course, public purposes, but how do you feel about those transfers?
Those transfers are, well, based on their needs and their justification. We demand them to provide us a master plan, and how are they going to facilitate the development? What kind of funding do they have?
What about what do you consider is fair for the commission to receive in return?
In return?
For transfer of the land. For example, years ago, the land was transferred to Guam Power Authority to build their new building. And, you know, there are many recent examples. And I guess I just wanted, it's, you know, even here in the legislature, we might have different views on this, but the commission, the Chamorro Land Trust is a trust. It's not supposed to be a land bank that we're giving out land. It's supposed to be a trust for the beneficiaries of the trust. And so, yeah, I'm just looking if you have any thoughts on how to creatively, allow use on the property without necessarily losing the benefit for the beneficiaries in the long term.
Well, there's time where they'll come in and request for a use of Chamorro Land Trust, but they just end up coming here and get a public law and transfer the property without our input.
Oh, I understand.
So those are the things that I feel it should stop. If we really want the trust to handle its authority, give us the funding, give us the source.
That's a very good point, Mr. Cruz. Thank you for making that. I very well taken. Very good point. I know that the board has a plan to deal with all the leases that have been raised, in the past couple of years, all the controversies, and that they are working through all of those, and lots of staff work, lots of commission members. They're reviewing lease by lease, and so I want to thank you in advance for the work you're going to have to put into resolving all of those. Do you have any, I know that you retired from the government of Guam, but do you have any conflicts in any businesses that you might be involved in with the work on the commission?
No, I don't.
All right, Senator Taitigui.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you can tell, our chair is very passionate about Chamorro Land Trust as well as ancestral lands, and greatly appreciate the questions that she asked. It's good information for me. But Joe, or I should say Mr. Cruz, because I don't know you personally, but I definitely know your wife, and I'm supposed to give you a hard time right now.
Okay.
She said, give him a hard time. So I was looking at your background, and I think you know this, but my father and my mother were both working at land management for many, many years. In fact, when my mom passed away in 1998, she was the deputy director for records for many years, and my father retiring after how many years? 40 years. And then I started looking, and then I see Air Force. You are mirroring my father's his life, from Air Force and then retiring and then going to land management and retiring there. So I was going to say, Dad, what do you know about Mr. Cruz? To get a better look. But, if your wife is allowing you to serve one more term, and I know her very well, that she wouldn't let you do it if you're not already doing a good job at it. And making sure that all the T's and I's are dotted. So I'm going to take it by Terry's recommendation that, I'm going to let him do it again. He's doing a great job, but I can't find anything wrong when you look just like my dad's record in history. Exactly like him.
Well, I work with him.
I know, I looked at the year.
It's like a role model.
1974, that's about the time I used to walk into land management asking my dad for money, And when he wouldn't give it to me, all you guys that were huddled around his desk would say, hey, Jose, just give her some money, But my father goes back a long way, and whenever it comes to issues on land management, and even Paul. I remember Paul when I was little working at land management, when he was at land management for so many years. And, I definitely have my dad as an advisor when it comes to Department of Land Management and Chamorro Land Trust.
He's the godfather for HPR.
Yeah, he is, right? It's very emotional for me, because my mom, who passed away, she was a good woman and made a lot of discoveries there. So with Chamorro Land Trust, I think the wealth of knowledge, just like Pika mentioned earlier, is so important when we have board members sitting on these boards to have that information. And so you definitely have my support. Thank you. Hope I gave him enough hard time right there, Terry, but I mean, just looking at his record, it's going to be difficult for me to do that. So I wish you the greatest of luck there, and thank you for serving and
Thank you.
continuing to serve. I'll say hi to my dad for you. Okay.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you again for those of you who submitted testimony. Mr. Cruz, we are also having a hearing here tomorrow at 9 a.m. regarding the litigation that the Chamorro Land Trust is currently involved in. So the United States sued the Chamorro Land Trust Commission, yes. And we're going to get an update from the commission and council, and you were probably on that board when the litigation began. But I think we're of course, it's a very important time for the Chamorro Land Trust. We need it to continue, and we need it to thrive, and we need it to withstand all the challenges that are coming its way. And so I guess I just want to ask you in closing, and thank you for your commitment to this, and ask you again, you're willing to put in this kind of time and effort and dedication really to this this mission. Mr. Cruz, yes? I mean, do you agree? Yes?
Yes,
Are you
I
willing
do.
to do that?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So that's it. Thank you very much, and we will conclude the testimony. Thank you to the family for being here also, and we will conclude the hearing part for Mr. Jose I. Cruz for the Chamorro Land Trust Commission.
Yeah, thank you.
You want? All right. Right. If we're ready, we will begin with the next segment of our confirmation hearing. This is for the appointment of Jose Arthur D. Chan as a member of the Guam Land Use Commission. I see Mr. Chan is seated. Welcome, Governor Gutierrez. Is there anyone else here who is here to provide testimony for or against the nomination? Mr. Santos? All right, so the Guam Land Use Commission is our centralized, under the centralized planning law. All right, is charged with the duties of reviewing applications for zoning, rezoning, for variances to our zoning restrictions. And so this commission has very important work. It also meets very often and has meetings at the time that it takes to get through all of these applications. And they have several applications all the time. I mean, this commission is very good at publishing their agendas in the newspaper, so we know exactly which cases they are working on during those meetings. Its goal or its mission is to ensure that the people of Guam are not subjected to unbridled and unmanageable growth that would threaten the benefits, comforts, and privileges to which each Guam resident is entitled. So there are 5 members on this commission. They're all appointed by the governor with advice from the consent from the legislature, and they have some staggered terms. The Guam Land Use Commission hears from the other government of Guam agencies when they are considering applications before it. They are supposed to consider also the findings or testimony from all the other government of Guam agencies involved in permitting for projects, that are involved in environmental protections and historical preservation, and all of those. So that's some of the things that the Guam Land Use Commission has to consider. So now, without any further ado, we will accept testimony from Governor Gutierrez. Would you like to propose to? I was going to let him go.
Last?
Yes.
Oh, I'm here, Madam Chair and Senator Tello, in support of the nomination of Mr. Art Chan. I've known him since 1986, and we have been actually working together in a lot of the projects that went around the entire island when I was governor, particularly with Hawaiian Rock, doing most of the paving and the opening up of easements and roads on the island. But I know him also as a very active individual in the community, not only working up at Dedido Municipal Planning Council, but also in the Shrine Club. And besides that, his work background as a professional engineer and his involvement in the community, I think he's poised to do what really is right in the land use decision-making process. I know that you don't want unbridled growth on this island, and I think that on the other side of that picture, you need someone there that can balance the two, that what we need here is really good economic development, and somebody that can grasp what is going on. I know that you have introduced a bill also to sort of speed up the process, not have Guam Land Use Commission become an impediment for growth, and not take into consideration that you're only on one side of protecting and no growth at all. I think that Mr. Chan really has the brain and the wherewithal to think what's good for the island, and I'm just happy and I'm very elated that he has accepted to be nominated to that particular commission, because right now, as an advisor to the governor on economic development, it is incumbent upon me to be able to find a way to make sure that balance, because I'm, been here 78 years on this island. I don't want it to change completely from where I understood it growing up. But the important thing is that we have to invite economic development into this island, and we need someone that has the professional civil engineer mind to know what is really good and balanced for Guam. So I just hope that he would be confirmed by this legislature and allow us to avail of his really excellent service, and he has proven himself to this island. So I wholeheartedly support the nomination and the confirmation of Mr. Art Demapan Chan. I call him Demapan because of his D name, middle name. But I thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much, Governor Gutierrez. Mr. Santos.
Okay, my name is Paul L. Santos, and I am the Guam Chief Surveyor, Chief of Cadastre of the Department of Land Management. I am here to support the confirmation of Mr. Jose Arthur D. Chan, Jr. to be a member of the Guam Land Use Commission. Excuse me. I have known Art for several years. I met him through a mutual friend, a fellow surveyor who has since passed away. Art is an engineer by education, and although he is not a professional engineer here in Guam, his background and training in engineering will enable him to review projects through the trained eye of an engineer, as almost all projects before the commission involves decision-making of an engineering and architectural nature. This is not to mean that he will be necessarily biased in his decisions. I believe that Art will balance the needs of a project or development with that of the community, and he will ensure that the social and environmental concerns or requirements of the community where the project is located are also addressed. I have no doubt he will be level-headed and make good decisions. Art will evaluate a project not solely on its economic benefits to the island, but also on how it will benefit the community socially and environmentally. That's the way Art will decide on the merits of a project. You can be assured of that. He has my full support and trust that the legislature will confirm him to be a member of the Guam Land Use Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Santos. Is there anyone else who's here to testify on behalf of Mr. Chan? I received testimony in advance from Faye Valencia Ovales. She's also in support of your nomination and confirmation to the Guam Land Use Commission. So we will include her testimony in the confirmation report. And now, Mr. Chan, we could hear from you.
Good afternoon, and Honorable Senator and Senator Terlaje. My name is Jose Arthur D. Chan. D is the Kanay, not the Mapan. I've been on the island for 50 years. Although I was born in the Philippines, I may consider myself now as a Chamorro because I'm also married to one. And we have two lovely daughters. And she couldn't come today because last night they were at the hospital with my grandson who had high fevers. And she didn't come back to the house until 8:30. And so she's resting. But nevertheless, she says that her support for me is here. And I was reading through the appointment that was given to me by our governor, and one of the things that she mentioned that was that of integrity and honesty, and I think I have that. I have been here with only two companies that I have worked for: J&G, Johnson Guerrero Construction, and Hawaiian Rock. And I've been with them in more than, this is my 35th year with Hawaiian Rock. And I'm glad that they have asked me to go ahead and to help the government and help the governor make sure that the applications that we have will meet the requirements, as well as be something that will be of use economically, and also to be a partner of the government or of the island. The other thing is the responsibilities that was shown to me as far as the email that you sent, the work that the Guam Land Use Commission does. And I believe that my knowledge of engineering will provide me that background that would enable me to provide a better decision on any type of zoning changes or whatever. I'm really humbled by the appointment that was given to me by the governor, and I assure you that once confirmed, I will provide the best from the abilities that I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Taitigui.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Hafaday Governor. Good to see you always, and Paul as well, reading your testimony. I mean, I've known Paul for a long time, so when he has a testimony, I make sure I read it, thoroughly, and he gives you his thumbs up. So that says a lot, and having, of course, the governor here is just, it says a wealth of your commitment to doing it, but most especially in your testimony, how you said in front of us and the people who are listening, your commitment to be there to do the best of your ability and provide your talent to this board. It takes a lot of work, especially this board. It can be very contentious, and I appreciate that you're there. But I just wanted to say as well, I send you my prayers for a speedy recovery for your grandson, and hope he gets well. And to your wife, my best regards as well. It was mentioned earlier by Governor that an economic development advisor, you've advised the governor, is that true, on certain economic development?
Well, being a member not member, but being a worker for Hawaiian Rock Products, I was in assistance with the governor, of course, during his tenure as the governor then, that we did a lot of paving projects, which is still helping the community now in terms of having a suitable way of transportation from one island to the other. I mean, one village to the other.
When the one question I had is, I remember there was something with the Guam Chamorro Land Trust with respect to gravel or coral that was purchased. Do you know anything about that? How does Chamorro Land Trust, if they were to utilize some kind of gravel or any kind of coral that they need to backfill property or anything like that,
it was a bid, and it was supposedly won by somebody else, but not us, Hawaiian Rock. But what it entices was to get gravel from an area where we would be giving the right they say, because they were going to be using it for housing. Because right now it's full of it's mountainous and everything, that without the proper civil work that needs to be done on the lot, it wouldn't be available for use as housing. But so then I think one of the things that was wrong with that is that they didn't ask if the people that were going to do the work would also give in return places for recreation, and also the cost for providing utilities and that's needed for that particular housing project.
So that being said, I'm glad you're familiar with that scenario on what has happened in the past, and I know that whenever Chamorro Land Trust properties are cleared or anything, that there's, how would you say, material that can be sold.
Yes.
And provided to Chamorro Land Trust. So I'm happy to know that not only on an economic development perspective you have that information, but on an engineering perspective that you bring to this board, it's very important, and I'm glad you know of that scenario to ensure that no mistakes are going to be made or controversy with respect to that scenario. So I thank you for stepping up to the plate, and again, my prayers to your grandson's recovery.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Chan, thank you again for accepting the nomination. I also want to thank you for your professional service to the people of Guam, you as an engineer and in different capacities professionally, but also for your public service. So we see in your packet, and I know this from all our family members that know you, that you have been a very active member of our community. Guam Contractors Association, the Guam Shriners Club since 1986, the Lions Club of Guam, the Dedido Municipal Planning Council, as the governor said, the Filipino community of Guam, and many other endeavors for the benefit of our community. I want to put on the record a couple of questions, if you don't mind. I want to ask you, because of the responsibility of the Guam Land Use Commission, do you think, I have no doubt that your professional knowledge and experience is going to assist this commission in reviewing applications, as Mr. Santos has indicated, and really being efficient in that regard. And However, how will you balance the sustainable and responsible development? You know, and with, for example, we've got some agencies in the government, that's their number one job, is to ensure that environmental protections, for example, are maintained. Do you think that you will be able to accommodate those, or how will you factor those in? I mean, how?
Well, environmental protection is one of which is probably flooding, is a very big concern of something that if there is a development and with that development, what would it provide to the neighboring communities? Say, for example, if there is flooding that could be introduced because of a development that's being done in that area, then it should not be. It's something that should first be given more thoughts before approval is given. So I think the other environmental aspects are concerned probably the growth of trees, and that will prevent the flooding of the area as well as the erosion of the natural resources would be another concern. And those are the things that I will bring over to this Land Use Commission.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. The commission has a very powerful role, because while it is mandated to review all the agencies' reports and findings, they're really not mandated to follow those findings. It's still, they have huge discretion. So it's up to them which ones they're going to really enforce, make a condition of the development or not. And so we have actually seen in the past the Guam Land Use Commission, despite the opinion of the Attorney General that said, granting a variance in this occasion would be not legal, they did it anyways. And so I think that this commission has actually extreme pressures from development, because they have to go through the Guam Land Use Commission. And so I just want to know how you would handle a situation like that, where there is extreme pressure, and you are very well known in the community. I'm sure you're very good friends with many people and who are developers. Of course, this has been your career for many, many years. How would you handle those types of situations?
Well, like you said, being known in the community is a little bit difficult, but with the responsibility that the governor has given me in terms of my integrity and honesty, I think that would be the first concern that I would have. And given that, I think friendship is just secondary, because it's my personal integrity and honesty that comes first, and not friendship.
I appreciate that. That's the predicament we find ourselves in many times, and I appreciate that very much. I want to ask you particularly about your role at Hawaiian Rock. Do you think that Hawaiian Rock, as your employer, has pending projects before the Guam Land Use Commission, or as a subcontractor?
I believe so, yeah. But in those cases, I would probably recuse myself from any kind of interpretation or kind of, and that's the reason why I had to ask the company first if I could get into this appointment and not be a part of something that they are asking for in terms of land that is going to be of use to them. Because I'm just a worker. Mm-hmm. I'm not Hawaiian Rock.
Right.
Yeah.
So do you feel you're free enough from that type of pressure from your employer, yes, or contractors with your employers?
They assured me, yes, that I am.
That's great. All right, then there's just one other item, and that is in regards to mining, mineral mining, which my colleague brought up. So one of the roles of the Guam Land Use Commission is to serve as ex officio as the Guam Natural Resources Board. And it's the function of that board to study and evaluate plans for utilization of government land for natural resource development or exploitation, which includes mineral mining. And it in particular requires that all proposals for the use, lease, or purchase of land for commercial mining or removing minerals, rocks, or sand for processing shall be presented to this Guam Natural Resources Board. And the board will determine if the proposal is consonant with the public interest in keeping with proper conservation practices. So this may be involving the Hawaiian Rock Company or your competitors or colleagues. I mean, I can imagine, I'm just imagining that it's going to be a difficult position.
Well, you mentioned something about mineral. And in our area, there's only one type of material that we mine, and that is coral. And I don't see anything else in our area that would entice the decisions of the mining industry.
Well, we're talking about, they include in part of minerals, rocks or sand.
Oh, well, sand is not available until we crush it.
Crush the rock,
right.
Correct.
So
The coral. Well, that's what I'm saying, is that it's part of the role of the board is going to be to consider these proposals and recommend whether government land should be used for that type of purpose or not. And as we talked about earlier, there are some proposals to use Chamorro Land Trust land for those types of purposes and perhaps other government land. But what are you going to do in those situations where they're either involving your competitors or your company?
If there's a need for the cultivation or the construction of work that's enticing our company or the other companies that are doing the same thing as we do, then I think that has to come from other departments or the industries in the government. Because right now, what would be most suitable for a land for use would be for the betterment of the community rather than just for the company that's using the minerals that they're getting. Like, for example, the one I mentioned in Jigo, if that area was made to become suitable for housing, then it would be a better area for the community rather than having that uncultivated and unexcavated or a natural resource that will stay that way until. But also, you should also think of how much people do we have here? How much, would that be better the way it is? Or would that be better to help more people putting up houses so that we have those homeless people that there's a lot of them around here now that are around that needs housing probably that would be better for them rather than just an area that's going to be staying natural. Because not all of Guam can be cultivated for use in the construction industry. Part of the south is more of clay and basalt, which can't be used for construction. So it's mostly the north, which is almost mountainous, that has a lot of those resources for the construction of buildings. Especially now that we know that you can't just build houses made out of wood here in Guam. When the first typhoon came in 1961, that's when people said, oh, we got to have concrete houses. There's no two ways about it. So that's why you need those kind of resources for the construction industry.
I understand. I'm familiar with that project. You're talking about the Lahuna project that was proposed for the Chamorro Land Trust. And in that particular project, it's the coastline, right? It's the cliff. And they had also described this area to be a limestone forest over the aquifer, and one of the areas recommended, conservation. These cliff areas are, I guess, habitat. And then I remember one report describing it as a place that might actually have significant cultural significance. So all of those factors are going to be coming before you, and
Yes.
you're going to be asked to balance those or make a decision. But how will you feel about that if the historic preservation officer is saying this is culturally significant, we should try to preserve this if it's all possible, versus, as you describe, using it for housing. Now, that project was not proposing housing for the homeless or low income. But what I don't know. I just want to ask you one more time, I guess, because I really think these are very real scenarios that you're going to face on day one, and I want to be just have that on the record. How you?
Well, of course, the culture is first, but I wouldn't know that until I'm given the opportunity to see what type of things there are in that area. So, in terms of approving a land use application, which has problems with culture, then those will probably be taken into very, very hard considerations before any approval is done.
All right. And now one more thing, because the mayor of Dedido is here, and she's also submitted testimony. Thank you, Mayor, in support of your nomination, and recognizes that you've been an active member of the Dedido Municipal Planning Council. Now, some of these land use variances or rezoning applications go before municipal planning councils. So do you see any issue there?
We do. And there are times when we don't approve it. Just like there was an application near St. Paul's for some kind of a warehousing, and we find that the area is congested as far as when the kids are leaving the school. That transportation comes to almost a halt because of and putting more density into that location would probably make it very difficult for people to go through those areas. So we do.
Thank you. All right, so finally is the commission's only 5 members, and it only takes 3 to have a quorum and to make decisions. And I just want to ask your availability to actually make those meetings. Are you able to do that?
Yes.
All right. So I look forward to you being an active member, because even though they only need 3, I think the more input, the better. It's always good for the rest of us, the people in Guam. 3-5 people representing all of the different interests on Guam is a very, very huge responsibility. So again, thank you to those who are here to testify. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Governor, and Mr. Santos. And Mr. Chan, especially, thank you for, again, accepting this nomination.
Thank you.
So there being no additional individuals to present testimony, the committee will continue to accept testimony until Friday. I'm sorry, it's going to have to be Friday tomorrow at 5 p.m. And you may submit testimony to my office directly at Ada Plaza Center, Suite 207, 173 Aspinall Avenue, Hagåtña, 96910, or to the Guam Congress Building, or through email at senatorterlajeguam@gmail.com. This public hearing is now adjourned. The time is 2:55 p.m. Si Diyos masi.